Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the FareCompare weekly podcast. My name is Rick Cini. I'm the co-founder and CEO of FareCompare.com. We're going to be chatting on this podcast about a couple of interesting news topics. One is the third airfare hike domestically last week. It started last Thursday by JetBlue, very similar to the one the week before, which actually failed. We'll chat a bit about that. We'll also talk about vacation time, coming up with 3 things travelers should do now about that vacation time. I know I'm in the throes of planning my summer vacation at the moment. You should be in the throes of that too as well. We also have some interesting info on some little-known airline seat fees. And then once we get through with those, we're going to take at least one question from a customer, maybe 2, depending on how much time we have. So joining me today to kick this off is our editor from the site at FareCompare.com, Ann McDermott. Hey, Ann.
I want to welcome people to one of the few politics-free zones in this election year. So welcome. We've got tons of travel stuff for you.
Cool. Yeah, I'm trying to stay out of that politics stuff. I have no idea what's going on, so that's good for me, right? So let's talk about this third airfare hike. We've written several stories on what's going on. Prices, lots of stories. Prices are down. Prices aren't down. Prices are hiking. What does it all mean? You know, I think we've written sort of a story a couple weeks ago about what it really means when airlines raise prices. In this case, the hike was $6 round trip. Initiated by JetBlue last Thursday. All the airlines tend to match. We haven't really seen Southwest match, but this hike may make it through without Southwest matching. We'll have to see what exactly happens with Southwest matching. But in general, what this does is it sends prices up. It's sort of the equivalent of taking a grocery store and raising every price in the grocery store by a certain amount, let's say 0.5% or so approximately.
Okay.
Instead of just raising the prices of cereal and milk, for example.
I've got a question. As you pointed out, JetBlue initiated almost a mirror image of this hike about a week ago, and that one failed. And this one comes along, they do the same thing, and it succeeds.
Yeah, you know, well, there's a couple different reasons. One of them is that the airlines, certainly JetBlue, doesn't have the route network of some of the other airlines. So not only did they match the JetBlue route network, they also extended the hike to be sort of across the entire United States when we saw the legacy airlines start to match. This one was a little more muted than it was in the past. There was millions of airfares changed in the last one. This one was in the hundreds of thousands. So I think that's part of the reason that it's likely to succeed. But we'll still have to see what Southwest does, but I'm pretty sure at this point, after about 4 or 5 days, we're going to go ahead and call it a success since it hasn't rolled back yet. But you know, at this point, really, the interesting thing about this is that airlines actually are able to push these hikes through. Huge headlines the last 2 or 3 weeks saying prices are down. Now airlines are pushing up base prices. Business travelers probably are paying a little bit less, but leisure travelers aren't paying as much less as they would like to, especially during spring break if you haven't bought your spring break ticket. And I guarantee you it won't be that much less for your summertime travel as people start to look into that. And by the way, it's getting close. You're in February. It's a little early to shop for summer. Maybe if you're doing end of May, early June, which is actually a perfect time to go, it's actually much cheaper. But as you get into July and August, it's a little bit early to shop right now.
Okay, well, that brings us to our next topic, which is...
by the way, I would mention, Ann, too, that the reason I'm shopping now is we're going to be flying international to Europe, and you need to be shopping right now if you are flying international to Europe.
But you can wait a little bit for domestic.
A little bit for domestic.
One of the things we're going to talk about in this topic about vacation, and 3 things you really should start paying attention to and start working on now. And there's nothing hard, nothing bad, but just the sooner you get going, the better for some of this stuff.
Yeah, you know, the number one thing, and there's many reasons why people don't really get inexpensive airfare or in those group of 2 or 3 at the bottom end of the ladder of those paying for airline tickets, is they procrastinate. And and I will note that you can actually buy too early. We've documented this before. Buying too early in many cases means you're overpaying for tickets. So you got to start shopping at the right time, about 3 months beforehand for domestic, about 5 months for international, or you're going to be paying too much. But you also don't want to buy too late. In the case of international, don't buy inside of 30 days. And really for domestic, you don't want to do that either. International, the sweet spot's between 5 months before and 2 months before.
Well, I think the most important thing is, well, first of all, you got to start talking to somebody at work who takes care of vacation schedules, get that squared away, because it's important when you fly, almost as, much as, how far ahead you buy, but when you fly can make a difference. And you've given 3 dates that people should be paying attention to, depending
Sure,
if
yeah.
late summer or like May 16th, for example, is the last day to begin a trip if you want to save before the pre-summer. It's like a pre-summer bump, right?
Yeah, basically bumps price depending on the route, anywhere from 5 to 15%, and then you got that next bigger bump after June 9th. Of course, these roughly correspond when kids get out of school.
Yeah.
And then you have the drop on August the 23rd that occurs after August the 23rd. So, the prices in September and October, there's actually another dip later in October, tend to drop there as well. So those are seasonal price differences between there. If you can possibly plan your trip right at the edge of that, I've had lots of people saying, hey, I'm leaving on June 10th. Hey, what about leaving on June 9th and saving 20%? So, can you actually work that out? And I know it's difficult. I mean, a lot of people are traveling with friends and family, organizing up, getting everybody on the same place is not that easy. It's like herding cats sometimes.
Well, if herding cats, if you've got to fly in the peak summer season, there's still a few things you can do, and I think one of the easiest is to fly the cheapest days: Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday.
Right. If you steer away from Monday, Friday, Sunday, which are the most expensive days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday being the cheapest, at least on half your trip. And I say this all the time, and sometimes I don't think people actually catch that. It's like, okay, Tuesday, Sunday would be way better than Monday, Sunday, right? Or Tuesday, Saturday would be awesome. That's really your best bet for that length of stay. So even if you do it on half your trip, you'll get half the benefit. Now that's domestically. You also have, if you're going internationally, midweek and weekend pricing, with weekend actually being more expensive for international flights.
Okay, and one last suggestion we give people is you might want to go in the closet and pull out your bag and take a look at it. If it's held together with duct tape, you might want to get another one. And if you do get another one, make sure it's a carry-on, because you'll save money and your bag won't get lost.
People still don't believe that my family, I've got a teenager and my wife who 5 or 6 years ago would never have not gone with a big bag to Europe or to Asia, who now do that regularly with me, and they love it. And there's lots of people that have tried it. We're trying to convince some people that we're going with to Europe later this year. We still haven't quite convinced them yet, but I've almost got them there.
It's not the money for me. It's not the money. It's losing a bag.
International flights, you get a free check bag anyway. It's not about the money. It's about the freedom that you get, and the fact that in some cases, and some very painful cases, a lot of people have had their bags actually lost, or at least for a couple days, which can actually take away a good 2 or 3 days of your trip if you're waiting for your bag.
Another thing is, if you're going to be traveling on a train at various parts during Europe.
If you're switching hotels, if you're planning on taking a low-cost airline in Europe, all sorts of reasons to do that. I have this vision of those 80-pound bags being thrown over the turnstiles in the metro in Paris as people are trying to get around town. So although they do have a few of the entrances where you can do that, in some cases they're not easy to get through. So yeah, take that check bag. I guarantee you there's ways to do it. We've written tons of articles. My understanding is that women will pick a color palette, and that's how you make this all happen. I'm not really keen on how that all happens, but we have lots of articles on there that are approved by our editor on the site, who I'm speaking to right now.
Seat fees. Let's talk about seat fees. This is a fee that is sort of it's a sly fee. It's an insidious fee. It's becoming a more and more common fee.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a variety of seat fees, right? Some of them are, what part of the plane are you sitting in this case, cabin or whatnot. But then you also have window or aisle, or do you get your, pre-assigned seat at the time of booking, or later after booking, or at the 24-hour mark when they release all the different seats that they have to. These seat fees can add up pretty dramatically, and a lot of people, I find I still hear people saying, hey, I really don't like to fly Southwest because they don't have pre-assigned seats. So, having pre-assigned seats, if you have to pay for them, also changes the calculus as well.
It does. And Southwest, I pay their early boarding because by getting a better place in line, you get your better choice of seats. I buy that because I want an aisle, and I know I'll get an aisle when I buy it. But in a way, that's a seat fee, although that's, of course, not what they call it. But, for example, Delta does it a little differently. They have their basic economy fares, which are good. They're very cheap. But you don't get a choice of seat at all. The airline assigns you. If you want a choice, well, you bump yourself up to
the next category of fare. Yeah,
regular economy, which I think is called main cabin. But it's... that's another odd way of getting a seat fee. And, Frontier and Spirit for years have made no bones about, yes, if you want a good seat,
sure,
you will have to pay for it. But I think otherwise they'll assign it to you, and you can pretty much guarantee they're not going to assign you a lovely seat on the aisle right up front of the plane. So.
You have the haves and the have-nots with seat fees, right? So if you're, a loyalty member, sometimes you get some better deals with that potentially. So that's really good to sign up for the loyalty program. If you're if you actually achieve elite status with the airline, a lot of these seat fees are waived with some of those things. If you use a certain type of credit card, in some cases they'll waive some of these fees. Typically not the seat fee, but the cut-in-line fee. It's so strange that we have seat fees and cut-in-line fees and check fees and non-check fees and carry-on fees. I can't keep track of them all in my head sometimes, but so you will, if you don't fly this airline very much, be subject to a seat fee in many cases. And if you want to have a window or an aisle, or get the entire row for your family and not end up with your family and four different middle seats away from each other, you'll have to pay that fee. Or really choose potluck at the end. Sometimes at the end, if you're there at the 24-hour mark, you can get those seats.
A friend of mine just told me she made 2 million miles on a major U.S. airline, and I said, "Oh, does that mean you get a good seat every time you fly?" She said, "No."
Yeah, I know. On American, at 2 million miles, you get lifetime platinum. So hopefully it was American, and so she'll get some extra leg room there. If it's not American, then I'm not as up on exactly what the 2 million mark means.
I'll put it this way: she got a Toomey suitcase.
Got it. Well, I mean, 2 million miles, that's a lot of flying, Ann, over a career. So I think a Toomey suitcase is the minimum that's required there.
We have your favorite part of this podcast. We have some questions. Yeah. I don't know how many we can get in here, but Jason from Providence, Rhode Island is pretty specific. And for this, I believe you'll want to put on your science hat.
Ah, good. I love that hat.
Jason says, when I am traveling to San Francisco from Rhode Island to visit family, the flight's about 5 hours or so. When I am coming back, it is shorter. Why is that?
Well, that would be something the weathermen would call the jet stream. That means your aircraft is flying against the wind in some cases and flying with the wind in some cases. On a transcontinental or cross-country flight, that could be an hour difference. Now, I'll have to note, too, that if you're actually looking at the schedule times, they pad out schedule time. So if he's, sort of taking his watch and looking at it when he takes off, but basically it's flying against the wind or with the wind. Now, I just got through playing golf yesterday, Ann, and some of the holes were with the wind, and I like those holes. And some of those holes are against the wind. Me no likey. So that's the difference, is really basically the aircraft flying with the predominant wind.
Thank you, Jason. And now Jennifer in Dallas says she's planning a trip to Peru with friends, and she's in Dallas. The friends live in Houston, and they have collectively determined it's cheaper to fly from Houston to Dallas, then have the layover, and then on to Lima than it is direct Dallas to Lima. You with me? It's like $400 cheaper. And she's wondering why DFW is always more expensive than any other airport, which is ridiculous. And she wants to know if she should buy tickets IAH, that's Houston, right?
Yeah, it's intercontinental.
Okay, Houston to Dallas to Lima, but just miss that first flight. You see what she's saying?
Yeah, this is sort of what they call the hidden city.
Wow.
Chick. Yeah, is she skipping the middle part or the first part?
Well, it looks like she's thinking about skipping since she lives in Dallas, skip the
Oh yeah.
Dallas.
Well, wouldn't that be nice to do that? But if you skip that first flight from Houston to Dallas, they cancel the rest of your itinerary. So you can't do that. It's actually against the rules to do that. And if you did do it, they would automatically cancel the rest of your airline ticket. I know this is complicated. It's like, why would Dallas to Lima be more expensive when I buy the ticket than Houston to Dallas to Lima, basically on the same flight? The reason for that is that airlines believe that origin traffic from Dallas to Lima will pay more, and that Houston to Dallas to Lima, which they need to fill up the back of the aircraft in some cases, will not pay quite as much, right? And that's why you see the difference in price. The classic example I've seen, Anne, is Dallas to nonstop to Hawaii is $800. And you have Houston, which is Houston to Dallas. Maybe it's $100, and then they have a connecting flight. Then if you connect through from Houston to Hawaii, which is $400. So people actually flying Dallas, Houston to Hawaii for $500 instead of $800. Now you have a nonstop versus a connecting flight. That's one reason for it. But it's sort of one of the weird vagaries of airline pricing is that inventory could be completely different for a connecting flight than it is for a nonstop flight. They might be what's called yielding up the nonstop, saying, hey, it's a super convenient flight for people originating in Dallas, but we still have some empty seats in the back, and we need connecting traffic and people coming from Houston or, let's say, Charlotte or from Florida. They actually are going to get a cheaper price to Lima, even if they're backtracking back to Dallas.
I used to hear about this as a standard tip. A way to save money is to finagle around with this a little bit and skip that one flight that you don't need. Sometimes it's, you pay for a cross-country flight that stops in the middle, and you get off in the middle because that's where you really want to go, and it's cheaper to do it that way.
Yeah, that's hidden city. The first one is not really a hidden city. It's more of a, if you try that, they're going to cancel your ticket. So that one's not going to help you. But for example, you're exactly right. It's like I'm going to buy a ticket to the city I'm not really going to because it's cheaper to stop at the connection location. Now, we've seen that this is illegal. We've seen there was a site out there, I believe it was called Skiplag, that was promoting some of these trips. We saw them get sued by at least one airline, and I think also by an online travel agency as well. This is what's called hidden city. It's not legal if you're to believe airlines. Some other people think it's legal. It's not. In general, it's not a good idea. If you have, for example, a award account, they can take away your award account if they catch you doing this, for example. These are one of the quote-unquote hacker methods of getting cheaper airline tickets, and you have to be really careful about doing stuff like that. I'm not suggesting that anybody do that, for example.
Well, I've heard of, you talked about canceling tickets. I've heard about people that doing that on their way over, and then they go to the airport to come back, and they find out that their ticket has been canceled. So. And I think if you look at airlines' contracts of carriage, you will see them say that it's not legal. So, you're taking a risk for sure.
In general, it's not the intention of the airlines to have some city actually be cheaper, but it happens because of the vagaries of what happens with matching other people's prices, with inventory matching that goes on. It's very complicated the way pricing. There's routing rules that sometimes affect this. So there's also partner flights in some cases that affect this. So just be really careful about it. I know it's very frustrating to do that. Now, if the difference was big enough, she could always drive down to Houston and fly the leg back to Dallas and Lima if she wanted to save that. I've seen people do that. I've seen people actually in the Dallas area drive down to Waco, for example, which is a few hours away, because the Waco to Lima flight was cheaper. So it happens in cities that have multiple airports. In the case of Dallas, American only flies out of one airport, but we've seen this out of cities like LA that has 2 or 3 different airports, New York, Chicago, for example. You have Miami and Fort Lauderdale being close together. So this technique is something where you can check out these multiple airports and the prices can be cheaper. Now, again, many times it's connecting flights the other way around.
Well, we'd like to thank Jason and Jennifer for their questions. And if you have a question, please contact Rick at customer.service@faircompare.com, and he'll set you straight.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to chat. I mean, look, I don't know the answer to every question, but I do. I've done a lot of travel, and I've spoken with a lot of the smartest people there is to know in travel. So I may not know exactly the answer right away, but I'll help you do that. So please ask questions. If it's about airfare, I can certainly help you out there. And then, if you want to check out our native app at faircompare.com/app, just do that on your phone, either Android or iOS. We'll show you our Adventures app. I was looking at it again this morning. Another couple destinations. So check that out as well, and catch us on the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and a variety of other platforms. And again, thanks for watching, and happy to answer your questions. So please keep sending those questions in.
Thanks.
Thanks.